Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the new Serpent column record, Tassel of Aries. I didn't really know what to expect going into it. I hadn't really listened to too much Serpent column before. It's possible I have in the past, but honestly, I don't really remember. So this record has 4 songs totaling about 38 minutes, with the last song being a 2 to 3 minute like folky instrumental. The album itself is, I would say, more into the realm of black metal, but I feel like even that description of it is too simple. It's really hard to distinguish where it fits on the sort of extreme metal spectrum. You do have the shrieking vocals, you do have these frantic, chaotic drums, but you also have a bit of an understated guitar tone. It's a little bit more clean, and you also have these odd time signatures, which are sort of more progressive in nature, but not. It doesn't sound like progressive music. However, I think the approach to the songwriting was quite progressive, if that makes sense. As far as production goes, we'll start there. Normally, I would do a track rundown, but with this record, it was really hard to, for reasons I'll get into a little bit later. But as far as the production goes, it's quite raw, a little loud at times, especially with the drums. The vocals themselves are quite distant, while sort of remaining atmospheric and kind of whatever else. The master sort of seems to have this like tape distortion quality to it. It's possible it was recorded analog, I'm not too sure. At the same time, there being this layer of distortion and gain, and it's a little bit lo-fi at times. At the same time, it's very clear, which I think is really interesting, and I think that is a really good way to do production on a record like this, where you have these interesting melodic sections or interesting riff writing, or these chords that are maybe a little bit less used in, black metal or Western music in general, honestly. I think the quality of the production really lets you hear exactly what's going on with those interesting choices. Note choices, chord choices, all that. The drums, I will say, are both a strength and a bit of a challenge to listen to. It's raw and organic, and it has this really nice spice to it. You also tend to get a little lost in the chaos. There's this really loud, it's quite loud, so you're hearing a lot of drums, and he'll sort of switch up the beat where it'll be short bursts of blast beats at the end of a section, or it'll kind of go in between these like really fast rolls into a blast, into a fast roll. Like, it's quite interesting how the drums were written as well. And even that, I think, tends to help this record creatively. Like, the drums are very creatively written, the guitars are really creatively written, and the bass comes in. It's a nice supporting feature, I think. I wouldn't say the bass is particularly prominent, but you can hear it if you listen for it, that kind of thing. And even then, the vocal is sort of on top with sort of this different, distant, atmospheric thing, while maybe it's doing something else a little bit more thrashy or a little bit more progressive. It sort of ties it all together, I think, really nicely. But yeah, the drums can be a bit of a challenge just because of how chaotic they tend to be. As I mentioned, it is a variety of sounds sort of packed into this record. You do have these melodic sections, sometimes almost lending itself to like an Iron Maiden style twin guitar kind of thing, or leading into a thrashy sort of rhythm, or something that's a little bit more atmospheric. He does use a lot of odd time signatures and odd switching time signatures to sort of transition, and that's usually done in tandem with the drums, so you almost don't get a sense of what's going on, because he'll just sort of like hit this blast section real fast, and then that'll be the extra note or whatever else in sort of the standard 4/4 time, or whatever you want to call it. Hopefully that makes sense. I would really listen to this album and check it out and get a sense of what I'm talking about here, but the most important thing is that it is quite chaotic and frantic. I really liked how the songwriters, or songwriter, I'm not too sure if there's one guy, it sort of sounded like it was one guy, but there might be more. He's really not afraid of using interesting and strange chord progressions in addition to interesting melodies. The riffs and sometimes the transitional melodies often feel like they are like Mediterranean, and it gives it this sort of ancient Roman, Greek kind of feel to it. And I think that choice really helps it stand out from most things that we tend to listen to, at least over here in sort of Canada, West, whatever. And as much as it is frantic and chaotic, you do have these moments of beautiful, sort of melodic, atmospheric things. And I think the mix of the two is quite cool. But I will say as well, this is not really like an easy listen. This is the reason that I didn't do a track rundown. It doesn't fall into the standard Western structure. You don't have these typical verse, chorus, bridge, solo section sort of songs. They're quite long. You're going through larger passages where something takes time to develop, or it changes quite fast, or you really don't know what you're going to get through a listen of this song. If I was to do a track rundown of something like this, I would have to listen to each song several times just to get a sense of where it's going and how it got here, really. So maybe it's not the best for driving on the countryside, or, hanging out and, you're drinking with your buddies or whatever, and you want to throw on a record. I don't know if you'd necessarily pick Serpent Column to do that, but this is more something that you really need to sit down and listen to and pay attention to, I think. And I would really urge you to do that. This maybe isn't a record for everybody, and it's maybe not a record that you would go back to time and time again. After listening to this record, I myself felt like this changes the game a little bit for me. I think it's as a songwriter and as somebody who, writes music and plays guitar and everything else, this is really something where it sort of breaks maybe some barriers or maybe some notions that you had of like how you should do something. And that's really the highest compliment I can give this record, is that it really makes you think about your own songwriting and how you can adapt and change a riff. And especially for me, as more of a guitar person rather than a drummer or anything else, I really think hearing drums in this way, it challenges you to think about drums in a different way. Rather than just boots and cats, you've got some really interesting and creative ways that you could even weave in a blast beat where it's not just straight through, right? Anyway, I could talk forever about this one. I think I'll leave it there. I will leave a link below to check out the record. I would recommend not listening to it on Bandcamp. The sound is quite different. It's a lot louder and it's a lot more blown out. I felt like the Spotify one, the streaming one, sounded a little bit better to me. But yeah, if you're interested in checking out something that's a little bit different, I would go into this with no expectations and just see how you feel sort of throughout it. It is a challenge, but it is a rewarding one to get through and to enjoy. And I really did enjoy this one. It almost feels wrong to give it a number score just because I have nothing to really compare it to, really. It's something like a Fantafaxath or something like that, where it's a little bit, I feel like part of its goal is to defy a little bit of the Western conventions of music. And because of that, it leaves you with a little bit of a question mark. And I still sort of have that question mark. I'm going to say no number out of 10 for now. But at the same time, I really liked it. So I would urge you to listen to it. But listen to it in the correct setting. Sit down, enjoy, and just sort of get lost in it. And I think it's a really cool album to do that too. All right, I will catch you in the next one. Deuce.